A jagged rift tears open above a familiar overworld plane, spilling ash and a silence that swallows the usual blocky dawn. From shadow and smoke descends a black-clad silhouette, and the game's rules begin to bend beneath a presence older and colder than any mob. The village woke as if from sleep, villagers blinking in square doorways, chickens frozen mid-strut. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as though someone had paused the server and held a finger against its pulse. The rift did not flicker with familiar nether fire. It hung like a slash in the sky, exhaling charcoal and the scent of old storms. Light around it thinned, colors leached like paint left too long in rain. He descended not with the clumsy animation of mobs, but with the terrible certainty of a command executed. Black armor swallowed the horizon, a helmet turned toward the world like an omen. The hiss of mechanized breath rolled across the plain, a metronome that did not belong to fur or feather. Where he moved, grass dulled, pixels dimmed, and shadows lengthened like ink running on parchment. His cloak lay over blocks as if poured, obeying some other law. Around his boots the soil smoked and cooled into glassy obsidian, black veins like scars across the earth. A player in patched leather stepped forward, sword raised because that is what players do. He intended a hero's moment, a tutorial strike, but reality refused. The black figure raised a gauntleted hand, stone trembled, blocks drifted, and the player hung midair, limbs flickering like a crashing client. He sank to his knees not with bloodshed, but with the humility of someone held by destiny. The world obeyed. Creepers halted with sparks frozen, endermen fixed in their elongated stare. Even bows ceased to whisper. Arrows' shafts fell like stray leaves, their flight clipped by an edit no player could reverse. Redstone contraptions hiccuped, lights blinking out as if someone had rearranged the very logic. Furnaces refused fuel, chests locked with new keys, recipes returned nothing but silence. The realm was being recoded around him. A villager dared to step forward, emeralds trembling in gnarled hands. The black-clad stranger inclined his head once, and the trade skewed. Wood smoked to charcoal, wheat browned like meat left too long by a worldly hunger. Statues and totems seemed to remember an older worship, their chiseled faces shifting toward him as if the land had bent at last. The miners crawled out of shafts, torches guttering, coal like small stars in their palms. The redstone tinkerer stared at logic gates that no longer meant what they had. He clutched his head as if the wiring in his brain rewired. Attempts at defiance were quirks of bravery, not defenses. An arrow struck a helmeted breastplate, and the sound hit the plane as if someone muted the world. At a distance, a scholar whispered a name like a relic. He had read of figures who bend order, who command allegiance where none had been given. The name tasted like iron and prophecy, and though the lips that shaped it belonged to a different tale, the sound fit the plane, sliding into the code like an incantation. He needed no army to command fear. Obedience flowed from him like a tide. Where he walked, crops bowed and iron golems froze in their patrols. The bell tolled a note so low it cracked a merchant's jar. Night arrived not as a chance for monsters, but as a veil that sharpened his silhouette. The world learned that there are masters of rules as well as masters of war. In the shelter of pines, 3 figures watched: an archer, a miner, and a scholar. They moved like shadows among leaves, the archer's breath visible in sudden cold. "What is his name?" the archer asked, voice small as a seed. The scholar closed his eyes, fingers brushing an old tome. "A lord of order," he said, "who binds chaos to his will. He is iron and shadow. We cannot reason with him, only learn how to counter the law he rewrites." The first night of his coming ended not with a battle but with a world rearranged. People slept badly, hands twitching for tools that refused to respond. Plugins and patches dissolved under his shadow, and the usual stratagems tasted of fragility. In the morning, smoke threaded the low clouds, and the rift pulsed like a warning. He stood at its rim, still not yet a builder, nor a destroyer, but an arbiter, a compiler rewriting the world's rules. The plains had been a place for pickaxes and wandering, for farms and fortified keeps. Now they were the first chapter of something larger, a chronicle whose next lines would be inked by a stern and unbending hand. He did not roar. He simply extended his hand, and the horizon answered. It was a conquest of law, not of siege, a taking of possibility, a quiet dominion that passed through the world like a command executed at the kernel. Terrified voices would tell of the day the sky split, of a figure in black who reshaped what could be done, and of the first obedience given. But stories take breath, and this one had only begun. In the cold after the rift's first pulse, the plain lay quiet, and from its center the black-clad figure watched the map he would soon redraw around him, chunks of world recalibrated, rivers hesitating as if deciding a new course, and trees that had stood since the first seedling bent like reeds before wind. Parents drew blankets up to their chins. Children whispered about a lord who preferred order to mercy. In the watchtowers, scouts argued about arrows and armor, while blacksmiths stared at anvils that refused to spark. This was a war fought in syntax and code, and the pioneers who once matched coordinates and shared seeds now plotted lines of resistance. They scraped together bows and torches, praying that light could still be a kind of law. In cottages and in hidden mines, conversations shifted from resource lists to lore. The scholar taught of loopholes, of glitches like fissures through which one could slip. The miner recalled old exploits, places where gravity misbehaved and where a block might be pried from the rules. The archer sharpened her eye, learning to launch intention the way one learns to set a redstone pulse. They were not certain if such tricks would unmake a presence that rewrote the world, but certainty had been taken from them, and in its place they had cunning and hope. Farther off, in a ruined temple, an old map glowed, faintly marking places where rules had broken before. A thought took shape. Perhaps vulnerability lay not in strength but in forgotten edges, in flaws that time had healed with dust. The scholar traced a finger along a contour, and the archer tightened a bowstring as if pulling against fate itself. Night came again, and this time the rift glowed with a harsher light. Shadows lengthened across faces, and the black-clad figure turned to the trees. He set no flag, built no fortress, yet a domain of obedience spread. Even the sturdiest of cottage comforts felt altered. The world had always been a space for building and for undoing. Now it learned a new teacher, and the lesson was harsh. The black-clad figure watched in quiet, hands resting upon the hilt of a humming blade, waiting still. Above the conquered plains the sky tears open, as if some colossal hand has rent a banner of twilight. The seam glows with a light that is not sunrise nor moonlight, but a cold, humming color, an impossible hue like the inside of a prism that remembers war. Blocks of cloud fall away in slow motion, tumbling like the pages of a forbidden chronicle. From that rift pours a rain of geometry, shards of light that slice the air and strike the earth with soft, explosive sounds, turning grass to glass and ponds to mirrors. Animals freeze mid-step, wolves curl their tails, the chickens that pecked at seeds in the morning hold their beaks to the sky and make no sound at all. It is as if the world inhales and keeps its breath. Adventurers who had gathered at the edge of Vader's dominion, miners with diamond glints, a hooded archer who had once looted temples, a redrobed villager who speaks in the old market rhythm, fall to their knees beneath that new, terrible wonder. They have come to watch the Lord of Ashes bend the land to his will, to see what new cruelty he will make of stone. What they see is larger than cruelty. It is an alteration of the rules themselves. The rift hangs like a wound, and through it whispers a voice not heard with ears but known by the bones, a syllable of promise and command. It is the voice of other spaces, the voice that calls objects by their true names. From the breach, shapes tumble with slow, deliberate grace, not creatures of Minecraft as they were known, but silhouettes out of geometry and shadow, elongated monolithic beings whose limbs are chains of stacked blocks, and whose heads are cubes carved with sigils older than villages. They fall like hail made from obsidian and star metal, and each impact compels the earth to rearrange its furniture. Rivers change course as if they had been lied to since spring. Trees twist toward the rift with roots unfastening themselves from the soil. Even the moon looks down with an expression of worry, as though it has lost a friend. Darth Vader stands upon the parapet of his obsidian keep, a dark god amid the blackened towers he has raised. He does not rush. Conquest has taught him the patient ferocity of fate. Yet his breathing, mechanical, measured, beats in the world like an iron drum, and where it falls light falters. He lifts a gloved hand toward the rift, and the very notion of gravity seems to bargain with itself. Blocks levitate. A slab of polished andesite detaches from a road and rotates like a wheel of judgment. Gravel rises like a falling star caught in slow motion. The force, translated into this cubic realm, becomes a blunt law of motion. The earth answers him because it fears, and because it is apt in this world, will writes the rules. He speaks no words that the crowd can hear, yet his presence molds the phenomenon. The rift leans toward him as if attracted by iron. Out of the tear flows a thin, vertical shaft of light, a column of dark energy threaded with veins of crimson, and within this column, shapes resolve into form. Machinery like nothing forged in villager or blacksmith hands begins to assemble. Frames of black metal that click together in arithmetic perfection. Engines that thrum with the sound of a million anvils struck at once. These machines are not Minecraft constructs in any known recipe. They are archaic and sleek, like dreams of dominion built in a starless place. They fold themselves and rise. Where they touch the ground, the grass burns to cinder in a pattern that suggests runes, as if the land is being mapped to a foreign language. From the rift comes another noise, thinner than the thunder of armor, like a chorus of metal strings being plucked across an immeasurable distance. It is music of engines, and it speaks to the hearts of the strange creatures that now pour through. Endermen, drawn like moths to something older than night, step warily into the light and find their long limbs suddenly feathered with foreign metal. Their eyes blaze not with the simple madness of the void but with a purpose. Shields, bars of something like iron but humming, grafting onto their skin. Skeletons take on armor that arranges itself with the precision of clockwork. Even the creepers, those fat green tragedies of suddenness, are altered. Wires of dark crystal stitch along their spines, and a steady red pulsing runs within, like a heartbeat regulated by a surgeon invisible. The villagers scatter and huddle in their homes, shuttering windows and bolting doors that are useless against this larger turning of fate. The market bell rings and cannot be answered. Children, who once made games from the physics of blocks and gravity, sit on the floor and count the seconds with fingers that may one day wield pickaxes in resistance. An old librarian, wrinkled like a page turned too many times, lifts a trembling hand to a manuscript and finds the ink of its letters rearranging itself into charts that look eerily like the machinery now marching across the plains. Not all bow. A handful of heroes step forward, a lanky figure in iron, calloused hands clasping a sword that reflects the rift's light. In ragged flashes a woman who wears a map of scars across her cheeks, and whose bow hums with the tension of readiness. A child who has watched old stories of dragons and decides, for the first time, that stories must be lived rather than merely heard. They do not yet oppose Vader directly. Instead, they move like scouts into the new topography, seeking signs and weaknesses. Their boots make small, stubborn noises against a changing Earth, and each step writes a story of defiance. Vader turns a slow, deliberate orbit. One could think of him as a shadow with intent, a monolith that speaks in gestures. He does not merely observe the rift, he negotiates with it. His gloved hand touches the air, and the breath of the void curls into a column and pours down his arm. For a flicker, his visor fogs with an image of stars that are not this world's. He has been a conqueror of systems, but this tier offers him more than territory. It offers a bridge to an empire he once knew. The rift is not merely a portal but a scar in the fabric of things where other laws leak through, where the geometry of one universe overlays the logic of another. To master it is to master avenues of supply, of knowledge, of relentless force. He will attempt to bridge them. That much the Watchers understand without being told. It is an inevitability of men and machines gathering before a wound of fate. The column of dark light that feeds his keep grows wider, becomes a spindle that threads the heavens to the earth, and from it pour devices like pikes and towers. They are strange beacons, both beacon and engine, stamping into the soil and casting a web of energy that sings in a key that older magics do not understand. Where these obelisks take root, the grass withers into ink and the stone remembers new instructions. The land begins to obey commands that are not yet spoken aloud by any tongue from this plane. As these engines grow, the sky answers with fury. Bolts of lightning leap toward the rift, but they do not strike with natural law. Instead, they braid with the rift's crimson veins and reform into strands of energy that the machines drink like sap. Storms do not break, they recalibrate, circling the rift as guardians or as sentinels. The clouds adopt the color of burnt iron, and a constant wind rises that smells faintly of ozone and ancient iron. It carries with it a whispering that sounds like relatives of the Force, echoes of command, of submission, of a galaxy's memory. Those who are sensitive feel themselves tugged by it like a fisherman feeling a fish on a line. Some are compelled to worship, some to revolt. In the village, a child awakens from a trance and rushes outside. She stands beneath the rift and looks up with the terrible calm of those who have seen their fate. She raises her hands and, in a voice thin as a reed, asks a question to the sky that only the world can hear. Why do you come here? The rift answers not with words but with a rearrangement of weather, a gust that presses the hair to her face and leaves a single black seed in her palm. It is a seed that is both dangerous and pregnant with possibility. Her fingers close around it. She is small, but small things hold the capacity to germinate revolution. The narrative remembers that an iron golem, loyal by programming and carved from the grief of villagers, strides forth and halts at the base of one of Vader's beacons. It lifts its stone hand, a gesture that is almost supplication. The beacon blinks and reaches out a filament of electric light. The golem makes a choice. Its feet shift, it either crushes the filament or accepts its touch. It hesitates, and for a breathless moment, the world seems to hold its balance upon that small indecision. The filament kisses the golem's knuckles and a network blossoms across its chest, etching runes of readiness into its clay sinews. Its eyes glow with a new purpose, not villager-signed but machine-apprenticed. That is the danger and the seduction of the rift. It does not demand immediate betrayal, it seduces through offering. It offers power to the weak, safety to the vulnerable, a return of what was once taken to the fallen. It promises to steel the broken heart and temper the fearful mind. Through it, Vader will not only import machines, he will import loyalty braided through necessity. He will make this world suitable to the shape of his empire. Yet opposition gathers like a storm beneath storm. The archer tightens her string, her eyes aglow with an old oath to protect the borders between possibility and annihilation. The ironclad miner hefts his pick with the memory of tunnels dug to save lives and not to feed tyrants. The librarian, whose hands had once trembled, now grasps a codex and traces symbols that correspond to the pattern of the invading towers. A plan forms in whispers, half prayer and half craft. To sever the web the beacons draw, to find the seed of the rift and burn it like a witchlight at dawn. It is an audacious thought because the rift is not merely a thing to be destroyed. It is a wound reconnecting the world to a hunger that eats through both stone and soul. As the sky gapes, as machines climb from that impossible seam, and as the Lord of Ashes commands without a sound, the world waits on the edge of new grammar. Conquest is no longer merely of land but of logic. The rift offers an inheritance of power, and with it comes the cost, a rewriting of the geometry of being. Some will take that offer, some will refuse. The tale bending beneath this torn sky will be decided not by the sound of falling blocks, but by the small decisions made by those who stand amid the wreckage. By a child's seed, by a golem's hesitation, by a villager's sudden courage, and by the dark, patient hand hovering over a nascent empire. The rift hangs like a wound in the sky, blistering the blue with a bruised light. Clouds of obsidian coil around its edges, blocky and wrong, as if the map-makers of the world had misplaced a piece of night upon the day. Below, the plains of grass fold like emerald tiles, but the wind that moves them carries a metallic hum, a distant chant of engines and the rasp of a breathing helmet. Where the rift touches the atmosphere, strange blocks grow, half obsidian, half bone, each cube humming with a pale rune like a syllable of some forgotten command. Adventurers gather at the edge, a hard handful of miners and menders, blonde and flecked with soot, with eyes like lanterns. They do not stride like heroes in old songs, they come bent and practical, sharpening pickaxes and listening for the faint vibration. That tells of block and bone and death. From the shadow of a ruined tower steps a figure, cloak falling like spilled iron, gait precise as a clockwork beetle. Where his boots touch the dirt, the grass blackens his breath, is a machine singing in an empty throat. They know him without needing a name. Stories that were whispered as campfire caution now step between the dead and living. He is the fallen lord from a sky of other stories. His shadow long as famine, his helmet a black moon smoothed by 10,000 sieges. Around him the ground rearranges itself, blocks bending as if the world obeyed a new architect. Guard towers of iron and redstone rise, spitting little darts of light golems of carved stone march, each joint sealed with stitched obsidian. Mobs once scattered through the wilds now circle like satellites, piglins in helmets, skeletons with bows that sing a cruel lullaby. The rift is an altar, and upon that altar Vader carves a kingdom. He lays down a grid of obsidian roads, lined with lanterns that burn with a dark light. Villager markets are repurposed, stalls becoming barracks, smithies turn to factories that fold iron into helmets and the shape of fear. Yet for every fortress he builds there is a noise like a counterpoint. The sound of a river rerouted, of furnaces cooled, of children who watch and write the names of those taken into the dark on their palms. A band of that softer resistance moves like a living seam beneath the surface. A woman with a cape threaded from spider silk leads. Her hands are quick as loafing foxes, and she carries an old map cracked like a skull. Beside her walks a quiet boy, a smith's son, who holds a sword wrapped in cloth, not yet sung by runes but willing to learn. They slip between patrols, through alleys where the moonlight forms into steps, past furnaces that pound like hearts, and hear the stories of the bound. Inside the workshops people knot and unknot nets of redstone, learning how to make a spark that will move an engine, to arrest a piston, To make light a weapon. It is the smith's boy who first tries the edge. He stands beneath a sentry tower, the wind lifting his hair like linen, and he thinks of all the books he has read about impossible things. He draws the sword and the edge hisses with a new energy, not quite fire and not quite light, and for a moment the sentry looks like a giant made of night. The clash is a poem in iron, begun with a single chant. Children throw flint like felt, and the flint sings sparks that catch the redstone, and the redstone answers with a fire in the belly of a machine. The tower convulses, bones of its armor falling away, and a tide of small rebels pours like water into a broken jar. Vader does not come like a thunderclap. He moves in the deliberate way of the inevitable, each step measured by metal and silence. When his cape falls back and the sword blazes, it is less sword than decree. Red and cold, a column of night drawn with a steady hand. He cuts and the world answers in wood and bone, in the sudden scatter of scaffolding. Yet even as he moves through the city, his voice hums through the rift, low and hungry, and something on the other side listens. The rift is not merely a breach, it is a mirror, and on its black glass other shadows shift, sharp silhouettes that echo his command. A new figure steps into the light beyond, tall and angular, with wings like broken stained glass. The adventurers who have watched grow silent at the sight, for this one moves in a manner unlike the crude mobs at his command. It is an emissary, a thing braided from the rules of another realm, speaking in a voice that sounds like falling server packets. They bargain, and the bargain is an exchange of certainty. Vader gives his hands the work of conquest. The emissary offers a thing more dangerous: recursion, the power to fold the world back upon itself. Blocks begin to stack in impossibilities, columns that end where they began, stairways that spiral into the sky and then fall back through corridors that do not obey the rules of space. The rift widens as if the sky remembers another law, and from it pour shapes that are neither mob nor machine, shadows that move with the intention of sentences, their edges serrated by countless smaller possibilities. The adventurers find themselves cast into corridors that loop, where a single block might be two places at once, and maps that were certain are suddenly false. The woman with spider silk cape counts steps like a prayer, while the smith's boy tightens his grip and remembers the geometry of home. Their breaths go in and out in a rhythm that anchors them to the known, and for each step they learn anew how to make a corner be a truth. In the heart of the maze, they find a chamber carved from the rift's own darkness, and in its center sits a relic, a compass fashioned from brittle iron and a sliver of that same black glass. The needle is stubborn, pointing neither north nor south but toward something older, a center that is not a place but a decision. They take it because there are few things to do with relics but to carry them like vows. Outside, the city churns, structures fold like origami, and creatures shaped from recursion press like storms against the walls, demanding either conversion or ruin. The woman with spider silk moves forward, her fingers making the compass hum like a small bell. She speaks in old trade words, bargaining with geometry, with the idea that a path can be coaxed back into sense. The boy watches, and when he finally moves, it is to place the compass on a fallen pillar, letting it point with all the stubborn hope they have. The needle shivers and then steadies. A corridor that was chaos becomes a line, a stair that split into riddles aligns with purpose. They walk and the world begins to obey. Far above, the rift tastes of constraint, and from its edge, a sound like a metal bell rings out, signaling to the force that holds that place that something is moving within, a small resistance turning the gears. Vader turns, and the helmet lifts as if to hear, listen.